the most underrated skill of leadership is listening. And just listen to them. Pay attention. If the boss is holed away in their office, don't be surprised when things don't go well. And don't be surprised when they start doing things the way they want rather than what your expectations are. You got to get out of that office. You got to walk the floor. And I don't care if you're in a warehouse or a factory or in a law firm. You got to get out and be with the people. One, because they need to know that you care about the operation. Two, they need to know what their expectations are. So you need to be there to keep reinforcing what the goals of the team are. And three, if there are little mistakes, your being present allows you to catch them when they're little. Almost all the time, I've seen serious discipline happen in the fire service. It was after a boss was not present, would hide in their office, or only come out for the 911 calls they were dispatched on. And then it turns out the crew was making little mistakes that nobody noticed until it blew up into a big mistake one day. And then the boss says, well, I never knew about any of this. Oh my gosh. How come nobody came and got me?
Hello and welcome. If you've any experience leading teams in stressful or high pressure environments, then this is the episode for you, because my guest today is fire captain and author Mark Andrew. We'll be hearing stories and learnings from Mark's 30 plus years career as a firefighter and paramedic, what leadership in those emergency environments has taught him about leading in high stress situations, micromanagement versus effective leadership presence, why caring about your people is a must, his advice for new and struggling leaders, and we will also be hearing about his book, Leading Through the Heat, and much more besides. And he's got some great stories to share, some really helpful perspectives on high stress leadership, and just generally a great conversationalist, as you will soon find out. So stick around. If you would like to get a copy of his book, you will find that link down there in the show notes. So I do encourage you, click on the links and buy a copy of that book if you can. Stepping into leadership in a technical environment can feel isolating, high pressure, full of self-doubt. Leading with Integrity, the podcast, is here, as is my Integrity Leaders community, to enable new leaders like you to surround yourself with shared experience, practical guidance, and a trusted network of peers so that you can grow into a confident, capable leader faster, but without losing yourself in the process. To find out more, click on the link in the show notes. It's on the screen as well if you're watching the video. It's leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. Learn all about it on the website. Click that green button on the homepage when you're ready, and it will take you to the Integrity Leaders sign up page. And I look forward to seeing you in there very soon. Now let's welcome Mark onto the show for another great conversation about modern leadership.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast.
Leadership talk for the modern manager.
With your host, David Hatch.
Well, Mark, welcome to Leading with Integrity. It is lovely to have you on the show today.
Thank you, David. It is a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure having you, yes. I'm going to push you in at the deep end, I'm afraid, to kick us off. Tell us a bit about your story so far, your career, what you do, why you do it.
Just wrapped up a career of a little over 30 years in EMS and firefighting. Spent a couple of years with a private ambulance. After I got my basic EMT license, went to some trade schools, upgraded to paramedic, went to another trade school, fire academy, got my certification there, got a job at a part-time fire department. And after 7 years of just working in the field in entry-level work, building up the resume, I got hired by the city of Dearborn, which is on Detroit's west border here in Michigan. And I just worked 28 years for them. I was fortunate enough to make it up to the rank of captain. It was a job that I'd loved doing. And during my last year, I started writing a book. And as I retired, I found a publisher for it and put it out, and then started marketing it, and was lucky enough to meet people like yourself that are in the business of discussing managing people and leading people.
Okay, very cool. I feel like that was a very short version of what's probably a very interesting career. So for those of us perhaps not in the States or just not in the know, can you tell us a bit more about how the fire department system works over there? Like, what's the differences between, say, an EMT and a paramedic and a firefighter, and what do those roles all look like on the day-to-day?
Absolutely. In the States, to be on an ambulance, you have to have a minimum of basic EMT or emergency medical technician license. And that is not only going on 911 calls for emergencies, but actually an ambulance that transports medical patients hospital to hospital, specialty to specialty. And so just on a transporting medical unit, that's the base level. It is advanced first aid. It is using an automatic defibrillator. It is being able to have some simple self-use medicines like nasal Narcan and epinephrine pens, and could put people on oxygen. You've got a cursory knowledge of anatomy and physiology to recognize medical conditions, both medical and trauma. It's got various splinting and bandaging. And you could, once again, you're now licensed to bring people in a vehicle to an emergency room and report off to nurses and doctors. Then there's a middle step, not seen a whole lot, where you could also start an IV and give fluids to those people, and that's an EMT specialist. Most people don't do that. And then there's paramedic, which is all of that, plus you take EKGs to read heart rhythms and dysrhythmias. You diagnose those dysrhythmias. You treat them with cardiac drugs. So we have a whole drug box filled with 40 or 50 medicines. You can use the IVs to give fluid challenges if people have blood pressure issues or traumatic bleeds. You can do minor surgical procedures with the IV needles occasionally. We also use a manual defibrillator when you're a paramedic. So it's not an AED, an automatic one. It is a manual one. So I diagnose the heart dysrhythmia. I choose the electrical setting. I choose when to shock the patient. I could also use that machine to cardiovert fast rhythms. I could also use the machine to put them on a pacemaker if the rhythm is slow. So the paramedic care is way more advanced. Probably once you get to EMT, do some clinical hours, pass the state board exam, take the paramedic class, take a prerequisite, do the clinical hours. It's about a 3-year commitment. And so most of, if not all of the full-time suburban departments you see in the United States want their firefighters to also have a paramedic license. Some smaller cities, which is smaller budgets, might still hire basic EMTs, but most want the paramedic for their 911 providers. And so in the larger cities, in Michigan, it's Detroit, they have an in-house academy because they have such a large city and so many fires that it's important to them to train recruits in their way. The suburbs are smaller and are maybe hiring 1 or 2 people a year. There's no practical way to do an academy. So local community colleges and trade schools will put on a fire academy. And so you could just take a fire academy class and just go for 12 weeks. And it's like a little Army boot camp. And you come out fully certified as a state firefighter if you pass the physical agility test at the end and a written exam. And so most people that are into this line of work probably got anywhere from a 3 to 5 year commitment of education trying to get into the career field. And It's like I said, it's really rewarding. It's a lot of fun. It pays decent. You'll be taken care of, but it's more about the work, and it's more about wanting to help people in need.
And so, I mean, I have to ask as well, like, what drew you to that line of work originally? What was it about that attracted you?
My father was a firefighter, and
Okay.
coincidentally for the same city in which I work, and it's the city I grew up in. And back in the 90s, it was incredibly competitive, because when I had first started, I did have a paramedic license, but the first few years I was applying, I was only a basic. Michigan was making that changeover from basic to paramedic at the time. So when it was only basic, you would have no problem having 500 to 900 or 1,000 people in a high school gymnasium taking the written exam, trying to be a firefighter. And so it was very competitive back in the day, almost to the point where unless you had job experience in the field for a few years, they wouldn't even look at you. They wanted you to climb those bottom rungs of that ladder, learning the skill before you get into a full-time 911 environment. So after years and years of applying and bouncing around and building my resume and adding certificates, the city of Dearborn called, and it was the city my dad worked in. And so I would have gone anywhere at the time. I very much wanted to do this full time. And just coincidentally, that was the city that called. And it was a great 28 years.
Yeah, it's kind of the family business then, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. That is kind of cool. Yeah, weird coincidence though.
It really was, because it was so competitive. Back in the day, all of us, everybody I knew that was applying, some people were into it 5 to 7 years, just applying. We'd all see each other at the next test. We'd all see each other 4 towns over at their test, and you just got to meet people and know people. And then as years tick off, we finally started getting those jobs, and oh, hey, so-and-so went to this city, and hey, we hire on, and oh, yeah, I remember you from that test 2 years ago. And so it was this fun cadre of dozens and dozens of people you just meet. Finally achieving that goal. It's way different now. One, here in the States, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but we have much less younger people wanting to go into the labor market. We have way more people going into tech and STEM fields. So our applicant pool is way down. The applicant pool is also way down because to get those entry-level jobs, working at a private ambulance, maybe being a tech in an emergency room, being a paramedic doesn't pay a lot of money outside of being a paramedic and a firefighter. And so at the community college I was teaching at, the paramedic license for EMT, paramedic, all the clinical hours, all the prereqs was more credit hours than the associate degree in nursing. But nursing's entry-level wage is probably triple, 300% higher than a paramedic wage. So we were just losing applicants because they didn't want to have to go through the lumps of climbing that ladder at that bottom scale, waiting years to get into the fire service. So we just started losing people to police work, losing people to nursing. And so now we, if we have 2 retirements in a year and put out a job application, we might get 4 or 5 applicants. And then we got to hope that of the 4, at least 2 of them can pass the physical agility and have all their licenses in hand and are ready to go. So the applicant pool has certainly shrunk, but I'm hearing good things about the labor sector in the States starting to make a turnaround for trades. And I hope that holds true.
Yes. So, I mean, there's a lot of talk about that at the moment around AI and the sort of jobs that it's likely to be replacing versus the ones that it never can, or at least we hope it never can. And trades are top of that list. And hard to imagine an AI or a chatbot fighting a fire or treating someone in an accident or similar. At least Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't want
Another
AI to be taking over healthcare personally, but that's just me. Like,
exactly. I did hear one interesting thing as it pertains to the AI. To power AI, you're going to need a lot of hard drives and software and those centers that push that to put up one data center. Apparently, it's a fleet of 100 electricians, and we just don't have that many electricians. So there's this push in the States. Hey, we high school kids, if you'd like to work with your hands and you want to get certified as an electrician, you're not going to make a ton of money being a journeyman or an apprentice, but just, work hard for a couple of years. And with AI, electricians and plumbers for those cooling systems and power systems, they could have really good careers in 10 years and make a ton of money because there's just no competition. We just don't have enough of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting decade, I think. Next 10 years, see where that goes. Yeah. So one of the other themes I think that's worth exploring now is this idea of leadership in stressful environments, which feels like it's going to play quite nicely to your experience. I hesitate to use phrases like the average workplace because I don't think that really exists. But for someone who might be listening who doesn't have a job like this, who works in an office environment and they feel like they're stressed every now and then, I mean, from your experience where stress is probably a daily part of the routine, isn't it, in certain situations? I mean, what lessons have you taken away from that sort of environment that might be useful to someone who is struggling with something like that today?
While, yes, there are times that it is stressful, I spent time in my book talking a lot about the corollaries between what we do and what you would find in the corporate world or in any workplace, whether it could be a warehouse or a factory or an office with cubicles. You're just managing people. And surprisingly enough, in the fire service, the stress comes just as much from the day-to-day as it comes from the real emergencies. Because just people sometimes need help, yet it's not life and death. So a good portion of our 911 calls happen to be medical runs that are of a more routine nature. And if you get a lot of people that just don't have the means to get themselves to a doctor, or they are dealing with mental health issues that aren't acutely medical or life-threatening, it does stack up the 911 calls a day. So the station I was at when I retired, I would say on the weekdays, we would have anywhere from 20 to 25 calls a day for the entire station. A lot of the stressors that we deal with are from the non-emergent calls, because if you're you're on an ambulance and you're going on 15 calls in a day, not all of them are going to be life-threatening. And so you have a lot of your hours a day are just of a routine nature. And so, one, it's tiring to just be constantly going out on calls all day. And two, you've got to then not only physically be ready for when that emergency happens, you have to mentally be ready, because it is difficult to manage being in a non-emergent system for 7-8 calls or even 15 calls. And then you go 3 days and all of a sudden now there's something very emergent, and just being able to turn that on. So you've got not only the physical nature of just being in and out of the building for 24 hours and not sleeping a lot. We've got the mental stress of just being gone a lot, dealing with a lot of non-emergent runs, some minor medical emergencies, and then the occasional very serious medical emergency or a car accident or a fire. So keeping people on their toes, ready to perform, is, I think, one of the more desirable leadership skills that we see, because it's so hot or cold depending on the level of the emergency in terms of the stressors we deal with.
I've heard similar but slightly different things from people in police work, people in the armed forces, about that sort of the extreme highs and extreme lows sort of thing, where you just spend a lot of time sitting around doing nothing, waiting for then this really short, sharp, very high stress situation. I mean, is that more stressful? Is that worse than like just a consistently high level, do you think? Or what's your experiences of that?
I wouldn't say worse, but it's harder in a different way. Because if you want to throw into that, possibly some homeless population, and a lot of cities are dealing with that in the United States. That's a lot of calls a day for people sometimes that are just cold, and we'll take them to an ER, we'll take them to a shelter, the police will take them to a housing shelter, and then they just leave, and then we're going on them again in 8 hours. And so the stressor of just not being available for the people in your district who might need help because I'm on a mental health crisis in the same day. Those are the types of stressors. I like the way you said, dealing with the highs and the lows, whether it be police or the military or us. That is the stressor I dealt with more than dealing with the emergencies. And the flip side to that is when we have the real emergency, the gunshot victim, the stabbing, or the fire, those are such rewarding calls to be on, of having this fire to go put out. They're tasks that are legitimately fun to do. I get to have a crew break down a door, and we get to rush in with this hose and we chase this flame, and it's very adrenaline fueled excitement. So when we have a fire or we have a rollover where we use the jaws of life, you'll have a noticeable uptick in the morale of the crew, to where people are looking forward to coming to work the next day because we really got the pleasure of helping somebody in need that day before, and to do a fun, exciting, adrenaline-fueled job in the middle of it all. So the stressor for us is way more the fatigue of the day-to-day than it is the stress of the larger emergency.
Fair enough. Yes. I've heard similar from a fighter pilot or two as well. The thing they've trained to do, the thing they joined up to do, and they get to do it for maybe like this much of their time. Mm-hmm. And so when they do, it's amazing, mm-hmm. Like the adrenaline, it's cool, like that sense of fulfillment and purpose. And yeah, this is what I'm here to do. This is amazing. Yeah, that's very interesting comparisons though. I guess the follow-up question then is, what have you learned from like a leadership and management perspective about how to get people through those highs and lows and those changing situations and try and maintain that steady, consistent level of readiness and performance?
You know, this one just is straight up management textbook buzzword of just being a good boss. Be present, be available for them, listen to them. I say in the book, the most underrated skill of leadership is listening, and just listen to them. Pay attention. If the boss is holed away in their office, don't be surprised when things don't go well. And don't be surprised when they start doing things the way they want rather than what your expectations are. You got to get out of that office. You got to walk the floor. And I don't care if you're in a warehouse or a factory or in a law firm. You got to get out and be with the people. One, because they need to know that you care about the operation. Two, they need to know what their expectations are. So you need to be there to keep reinforcing what the goals of the team are. And three, if there are little mistakes, your being present allows you to catch them when they're little. Almost all the time, I've seen serious discipline happen in the fire service. It was after a boss was not present, would hide in their office, or only come out for the 911 calls they were dispatched on. And then it turns out the crew was making little mistakes that nobody noticed until it blew up into a big mistake one day. And then the boss says, well, I never knew about any of this. Oh my gosh, how come nobody came and got me? Whereas the boss who's available every day generally can just say, hey, I noticed this little thing. Why don't we hold a training class on what the expectations are or how this tool works or what this medical protocol is. And let's build everybody up. And then I can give them expectations. You're catching these things when they're little and never allowing them to grow.
Yeah, I think there's something in there about like team culture, organizational culture, like the norms and expectations, the way we do things around here, all that kind of aspect of it. And I think there's also a question of balance between doing that really well, but without crossing the line into that sort of overbearing micromanager. Yeah. And you mentioned another word at the beginning of your answer there, which we're going to pick up on because it's one of the questions anyway, which is being present. So there's this concept, isn't there, of leadership presence in inverted commas, which I think has started to take on a life of its own, and it means all sorts of different things to different people. What does it mean to you from your experience? And then why is that the better way to go as opposed to like the micromanagement approach that so many bosses try instead?
I think it's the better way to go because one, like we mentioned, you're available when the crew needs help. So if there's problems, you're there to catch it. The problem with the micromanaging way of leadership is it's developing in the crew a lack of trust because it shows them that you don't trust them. So there's just the whole esoteric view of the boss doesn't trust us, and so we don't feel valued. There's the whole practical sense of micromanaging, which is now they're not learning by doing. And so there's a double-edged sword there. You're cutting the crew's legs off two different ways. One, because you're not trusting them, and two, they don't physically get the repetitions to now learn and sometimes make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And so I knew from the beginning I did not want to be a micromanager. I knew early on I wanted to be a lieutenant and a company officer. So I knew I wanted to be an active boss. Finding that middle ground was, I wouldn't say hard, but took some work and some attention on my part when I first became a lieutenant to not micromanage the crew, but still be available. And where was that middle ground? Because my first couple of weeks as a lieutenant, I realized I'm doing too much. On a life and death emergency, yes, I'll jump in and grab whatever and everybody goes to work. But on the routine calls, I didn't need to have my hands on these tools. I could step back and I could watch them. And then if they need some guidance, I will provide guidance, but I have to allow them to do it. And that's why just leadership is a skill and nobody's ready to do it on day one. It's going to take some development and a little bit of self-awareness.
Yeah, so I've long thought that one of the reasons why so many people do go down that micromanagement route is because actually it's one of the hardest things in leadership, in management, to not do that, especially when you're new at it and you were recently the one doing the thing. And you see someone else doing it, maybe not right or wrong, but just not the way you would do it. Mm-hmm. And it is so difficult not to go, no, you're doing it wrong. Give it here, I'll show you. And it's like the natural human impulse, isn't it? And it's so hard to overcome that. And I think that's why so many people fall into that habit. And then before long, they don't realize it's a habit. They just think, well, this is management. And yeah.
I have seen how that poisons a team to the point of officers grabbing physically a tool out of a young person's hand saying, you're doing it wrong. This is how it works. And the way the person was doing it was fine. It was just different. But I've seen the morale just strip right out of that young person's eyes in the moment when a senior officer would just grab a tool. No, we're doing it this way. And then they would do almost the same thing, but just a little bit different. And just how that just wrecks the culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard on the individual, isn't it? I mean, it's depending on how badly and how aggressive they are about it. It can be genuinely quite demeaning when you're in that situation. But also, the message it's sending to everyone else about your approach to leadership, I know best, and everyone else just toe the line kind of thing. I mean, you're never going to get like creativity and innovation and people going above and beyond, the kind of things that any business owner, any manager wants, but isn't going to achieve unless they're also able to be a leader.
Oh no, that's a perfect choice. And you gotta imagine that you could pick any successful corporation today. I can't imagine at a Tesla or a SpaceX or an Amazon or at Google that any of those leaders in industry on our planet today were stifling creativity from middle managers micromanaging people. The reason they had that innovation is because they empowered their people. It wasn't just Jeff Bezos who managed all of Amazon. He had an incredible creative team, and 20 years later, of hundreds of people all contributing, they built one of the biggest corporations we've ever seen.
Yeah, it's an intriguing example, I have to say. In fact, all three of those ones that you quoted were, because I think they've all got that well-known figurehead at the top who maybe doesn't live these same practices themselves. But then there's also, I think, a question of scale, isn't there? Once you get that big, like it physically doesn't work if any one manager is trying to run around doing all these things themselves and showing everyone how to do it. So like it's a necessity. I don't know whether it's a cause or an effect, though, which way around it is, whether it's they had to do it this way because they're that big and it's not possible otherwise, or they got that big because they did it this way. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of both. But
I could imagine at the startup angle, it's a little more individual. But yes, like you said, when they're that big, it scales. There's another leadership book, Mick Spires, he's from Australia, and he wrote a book called You're a Leader, Now What? And he says right in the second chapter, he goes, once I made it to vice president of this corporation, big, tall office building, I got a whole floor of people. I'm the vice president of this division. And I realized after a month, I am killing myself. I'm working 18-hour days. I got my hands in every project. I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm just running out of time in the day to do all this stuff. And then every time I get pulled into a board meeting or I get pulled out of town to go check the factory floor or the production line in this other area, and I left my crew behind in the office, they were completely unprepared to run anything in my absence. And then I realized, oh my God, not only am I physically running out of time to do the physical stuff, but just in a culture sense, I haven't prepared anybody to step up. So he says, I had to fail at that. And then I realized after a couple of months, every single thing I do from here on out is going to be education and coaching. I will never do anything in isolation. And I love those words. Don't do it in isolation. Every project he was tasked by the president of the company, he brought in one of his subordinates and said, here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing it. And let them watch and learn. And then after a year, he's now got a cadre of 10 people that all have job skills.
It's one of those things where, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of that truism for like early career management of like never be the only person who knows how to do a thing, because you'll never get promoted and your career will stall because they can't afford to move you because you're the only one who knows how to do that thing and they need that thing to happen. But it's, you see it in business owners as well, especially in like the startups, the small businesses. I think in those environments, it's a cost thing. Like if I don't do it, I have to pay someone else to do it, and I maybe can't afford to do that. Mm-hmm. But it becomes habitual, and then suddenly you've got to this point. I don't think there's anyone really honestly starting businesses so they can keep doing it themselves forever. I think we all start out with the idea of, okay, I'll set it up, I'll get it working, I'll get the business bit working and it making money, and then I'll invest some of that money so I can take a bit of a step back and I have to do so much myself and get a bit of work-life harmony and all those nice things. But we just end up getting stuck on the hamster wheel. And it's like, well, I don't know if it is micromanagement sometimes, but it is that kind of not maybe less about wanting to let go and more about not knowing how to let go. And then, it just gets stuck in your brain, doesn't it? And we all get a bit trapped by our own ideas sometimes.
Stuck in your brain. That's a good way to put it, because you're right. At the startup, it's very possible that Jeff Bezos in his garage and is running this for the first 5 years totally by himself. But once he wants to then move from the garage to a warehouse, you got to have a facilities manager. You got to have a logistics person, and a correlation to this in a completely different vocation. The author and chef Anthony Bourdain he mentioned in his first book, the one that made him famous, the thought of the chef who hoards his own recipes is a complete myth. That is just a creation in TV and film. Every chef cannot wait to teach their recipes to their sous chefs, or else they would never, ever have a day off. If you're not building that team up, your product will never succeed.
I love that. That's such a great way of explaining it. Maybe it's because I'm hungry. I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, Jeff Bezos, I've definitely read, like, in the early years, like that story of their first Christmas, I think it was, where he was the cliche of rolling his sleeves up and he was packing book orders himself and things like that. So maybe there is something in this. Yeah.
Right. And I'd read in the same story, he's working holidays, he's working nights, he's doing this. He had a partner, and it was an original investor, and then they want to scale up, and they're out of the garage, and they said, maybe if we just get a warehouse or something. So he goes, hey, I'm going to chip in this many thousands. And the guy goes, I don't know. I just don't see the future in this. I can't risk my family's money at that. And then just divested out of the garage, and, because he just didn't see it. All he saw was, we're packing books all day out of our garage, working 12, 18-hour days. And so Bezos was the one who said, no, I'm going to mortgage my house, and I am going to be broke for the next 3 years. And I'm going to go get a warehouse. I'm going to do this as a real business. And finding those investors at the beginning, everybody looked at him like he was crazy. But he was onto something, and scaling up his team, I think, was one of the key things in his success.
Yes. Yeah, it is tough, isn't it? I mean, that is completely understandable, because at the time that guy was probably right. It's only because we know what we know now. Like, there's no way of predicting that necessarily. And I do think, like, much as the billionaires might like us to believe otherwise, I do think luck and timing have a big share in some of these things turning out as they have.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so another word that you hinted at earlier, which I'd like to explore as well, is caring. Because I've found this in some circles to be quite controversial when you talk about leaders who care about their people. And you get some of the cliches and the sort of indignant responses about, well, it's not my job to care. I'm here to make sure the shareholder gets their value, or the bottom line, or whatever else it might be. Now, I obviously disagree with that. I have a feeling you will as well, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. So from your point of view, why does caring about your team matter? And what does it look like when we get it right and do it in the right, meaningful kinds of ways?
I think it matters because, one, it's just, in a human emotion sense, the right thing to do. But in a practical sense, it leads to better performance. Crews that are managed through browbeating and intimidation are always poor performers. They're only responding to fear. They're only responding to the threat of discipline. They're not, like you had said earlier, they're not innovating. They're not trying hard to think of new ways to do things. And so when you care about the crew, or in a lot of management texts, I call it empathy. When you have empathy, a lot of people mistake that as weakness, and it's not. So while I could be caring and empathetic, doesn't mean I have to be soft. It just means that I care enough about them to make sure that their development is going well, that their education is going well, and that they are provided the right amount and the right resources to do the job well. Because if I don't care about those things and it turns out that they were missing some equipment and I didn't facilitate them with the people filling the equipment orders to get them the right supplies they need, I'm only setting them up to fail. And so by me caring, it not only improves the day-to-day work because they now are going to have the tools to be better. They're going to want to be better because they can see themselves being supported. A lot of people also think empathy and caring means a weakness of being their friend or their buddy, which is fine to be friends with people. But a lot of the times, when you care about them, it means that you're holding them accountable. So I've seen some bosses that are so worried about being friends with people that they would let mistakes go because they don't want to be too hard on people. That's not caring. The true caring is caring enough to be honest with them. So when somebody makes a mistake, you could pull them aside and say, hey, I saw this thing and it didn't go well. Tell me what happened. What were your thoughts? What did you see? And let's train this up. So for me, holding people accountable is one of the best ways to care about them. Because if you just let stuff go so you could, quote, be their friend, you're only setting them up to fail later down the road if these mistakes aren't handled.
Yeah, I agree. I'd go one step further with that as well and say, like, if you're not willing to tell them things like that, then you're not even being their friend. So of all the people in my life, my friends are the ones that I expect to tell me the honest truth about something. Like if I've made a mistake or said something stupid, if they're not going to tell me, no one is. Mm-hmm. Like, so that whole rationale of you're not telling them the truth because you want to stay friends is, I mean, that's a fallacy as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, your friends should be able to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I mean, you want them to, don't you? About most things. Yeah. And I think you really hit the nail on the head right at the beginning of that answer as well, about the fear point of view. And again, like this whole sort of old school management style thing, that ruling through fear, like you wanting people to be stressing about things because you somehow think that gives better performance. It absolutely doesn't, for all of the reasons you've said, but also like if you're forcing people into that kind of fight, flight or freeze position, how much of their brain capacity is being taken up worrying about what you're going to shout at them about next, or what the consequences are going to be of that next little mistake that is probably out of their control anyway. What that means is they're now more likely to make those mistakes that you think you're beating out of them, in inverted commas. Like it's just, again, it's fallacy is the word, I think. And I've never really understood why that is so prevalent certainly in the business world. I'm sure it's not restricted to that. Other than that's just the sort of management I experienced, therefore that's all I know, that's what I'm going to do as well. Which is a pretty sad state of affairs, isn't it?
It is. And that's why I do mention in the book, I don't hold a grudge against bosses I've had in this job or in prior jobs that struggled, because a lot of the times it was the way they were taught. They just didn't really have the, whether it be the education, the job experience, or even just the enlightenment of being a better manager. So sometimes it really wasn't their fault. Some people really just were jerks, but most of the time they just didn't have the tools to know about human behavior and all of that. And yes, what you had said about in the business world about you don't want people being led by fear. I actually mentioned that in the book because that's a thing in fire and medicine. I've got a lot of times on a medical run, a few decisions to make, and I don't have time to keep running them up the chain of command, waiting for an answer. So I would always tell the youngest people on the job, I said, make the best decision you can medically for the patient in the moment. What's the best thing that serves their medical needs? And if you have their needs at heart, then if a mistake happens, don't worry about anything. I got your back. And we could always work around it. But if they're making decisions based on whether they think they'll get in trouble, then it just hampers the entire operation because now decisions are being delayed. And that's lack of decisiveness can make a difference in a medical scene. Am I taking this child to the pediatric center, which is miles up the road, or am I going to the closest hospital? Am I going to take this burn patient to the closest hospital to just establish an airway, or am I going to travel way, way up the freeway and go to the burn center? Am I going to stay on scene and manage this thing, or do we got to start driving right away and hurry up and get to the ER? They're decisions that need to be made right there in the moment, and they don't have time to get on the phone and call me.
Yeah, I think there's a great lesson to be drawn from that for less severe, less high stakes situations, definitely. But that core logic of make the best decision you can with what you currently know, I think that would solve a lot of like the decision paralysis in businesses the world over.
Yeah, and I could imagine if you're in business, you're in accounting, you're in a law firm, that you're dealing with this contract or this purchase order, that worker sometimes just has to approve or disapprove of this paperwork right now. And how many production layers are going to be delayed if they have to email a boss and wait for a reply? And I have a quote in the book. I had met at a public event former mob boss Michael Francesi. He's an author and motivational speaker, and he had worked in the 60s and 70s in the New York Mafia and made his way up pretty high, and did a jail stint and has retired from mafia life and leads a very, very productive life speaking out against that. And the question I asked him was, in TV and movies, there's such a reverence for the mob boss that nobody would ever challenge that person or go against them. How much of that is this generational respect of the mafia don who is running this entire empire, and how much is fear? And he goes, man, back in the 50s, it was all respect. It was this family thing, and everybody goes back to Sicily, and this is a centuries old tradition we're in. He goes, but now it's all fear. And I said, does it work? He goes, absolutely not. When you lead by fear, you always run the risk that one day they're going to fear somebody else more than they fear you.
Ooh, yes, that is a great quote.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Spot on. Awesome. Well, the next question I have for you is, I guess it's pulling together everything we've talked about so far, really. For that new leader, that first time manager, whatever industry or situation they're leading in, what would be the best piece of advice that you could offer them?
Before you become the leader, pay attention to the job and be good at it. Have that reputation of knowing your work and producing results before you become the leader. Don't be the guy in the background, the person who just does enough to get along, the person who, whether through laziness or lack of ambition, just doesn't lead on projects. Don't be the person who's skirting the rules or cutting corners, because it's really hard to be known as the lazy worker. And then all of a sudden they promote you to manager. And then all of a sudden you're going to flip a switch and then I want this and I want that. Give me 2 of these and 5 of them. That never works. You can't flip the switch. Lay the groundwork of performance and expectation years before you get promoted to boss.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's that leading by example piece, isn't it? And it's
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you were talking earlier about how there are the occasional jerks, but most people, it's just, they just don't know a better way. I think a lot of the times that comes down to confidence as well. Now, having said that, and this will tie together briefly in a minute, there's been at least one of those types in my career. I don't know if jerk would be the word I would use, but it's probably a publishable one. Where they definitely were just doing it for the wrong reasons. And the reason why that memory is triggered for me now is this leading by example piece. So it's the expecting others to do something you're not willing to do yourself. You get really het up about whether people are at their desks from 9 on the dot until 5, but you don't show up 3 days a week. And when you do, you're not in till 11 and things like this. And it's that kind of exactly what you're talking about. It's why should anyone follow you or do the things that you need them to do if you're visibly not willing to do it yourself and you have a track record of not doing it yourself? And it's an overlooked thing, I think. People kind of put too much emphasis on the title and the promotion and the status side of it and assume that will just carry them through. And it absolutely won't, especially not these days, if it ever did before.
Yes, and we absolutely have examples of that in a professional fire department. The common one is we have a uniform policy, and so we're there for 24 hours. So you can't be in the button-up pressed uniform for the entire 24. But we usually do daytime. You got to have the button-up uniform on, and then in the evening they allow you to wear the T-shirt and then when you go on a call, you could put the uniform back on, but they allow you to relax in the evening. And I have seen officers try to discipline a young person for not having the button-up uniform on at noon when he is wearing a T-shirt that's not even department related from some concert he was at, and he's wearing sweatpants. No, you can't discipline the person for not being in uniform when you're physically in the moment not wearing a uniform. So yes, I've seen that in a more emergent sense. There's a fire, it's over here, and your crew shows up, but you're just kind of hesitant and don't want to do the hard labor. So you wait for another crew and say, hey, the fire's down there, guys. I'm going to stand back here and supervise. And then they're going into the dangerous environment while you're standing back with your coat open, looking majestically over the scene and pretending you're some sort of military commander. No, you've got to be willing to go in with them.
Yeah, I think situations like that is all the more important. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes on leadership, which was actually from Nelson Mandela. And I trot it out quite frequently, but I always misquote it. But the gist of it is like, what people want from their leaders, it's not to stand at the back and supervise, to take your example, when there's danger around. When things are dangerous, when the stakes are high, they want the leader at the front, between them and the danger, ideally. And then when that's passed, or in other situations where maybe the stakes are lower, that's the time to be at the back, putting them forward and giving them credit and giving them the opportunities. And I think that's one of the most important fundamental principles of good leadership to me.
Yes, being between the danger and them is so apt. And it's not only the physical danger. It could be also the perceived or the more esoteric, administrative danger. So it's not only, if we're at this fire, I want to go inside, check the conditions, tap the floor with my axe to make sure the floor is sound. We've got a safe place to work. We could put this fire out, and I'm observing the conditions so my partner doesn't have to worry about that. So there's the physical, I'm in front of them, checking for safety. There's also the day-to-day, knowing that if anything ever goes wrong, we've made a minor mistake, or something didn't go right, that they know that if the boss is mad, I get called in the office. The boss will talk to me. I'm not going to have one of the bigger chiefs yell at the junior guy. No, he yells at me, and then I will take that information and run it down the chain of command. I've far too often seen a boss say, I didn't know this was going on. It's this guy's fault. And then all of a sudden the junior guy is taking all the blame. No, if you're going to be the leader, you take the blame and then pass it down if warranted. And sometimes if it's just a nuisance complaint, then just suck it up and take it and protect your members. That's your shield is you shield them.
100%. And I think that second example is something that works in any workplace. In fact, it was exactly the kind of example I was going to give you anyway. But that's what it means in like the average office, the average workplace, the cafe. You know, if you're the middle manager and there's like a really harsh, demeaning, micromanaging boss, then you're the one who takes all of that punishment and you protect your team from it. That's part of your role as a leader. And sometimes it doesn't have to be that painful. You can just distract them, like wave a shiny object and throw it, sort of thing. Like,
right. And most of the time when you make it, and I would assume it's like this in the corporate world, when you make it to middle manager, you have a layer of protection. So you should have nothing to be afraid of. If you're a director of a department and something goes wrong and the vice president calls you in, what are they really going to do? Put a letter in your file? He's going to yell at you for 2 minutes. So what? It's not like you're going to get fired. Take it and tell them, I've got this handled. I will educate the team. We will be better next time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it depends on the company. Sadly, you might just get fired if you've got a particularly fickle boss. It can happen. But I think if that is the situation, then you're better off out of there anyway, frankly. So, you know.
Yes.
Also, Mark, I've really enjoyed this conversation, I have to say, and we've gone off on some lovely tangents and barely covered any of the questions. So if you have time, there are 2 more that I would love to ask you.
Plenty of time.
Lovely. Okay. So we've talked quite a bit about how not to do it. So I'd love to hear instead your story of what is your best memory of being led?
My favorite memories almost every time were when we were at a scene that is somewhat a real emergency, a fire, a major car accident or semi-truck rollover accident. And my boss had enough years of experience to have seen this before. And they would say, I want this, I want that, I want that. And all those 3 things would be the perfect choices for what we needed in the moment. And then I would come back and say, wow, that's not only a leader who was being decisive, he actually had the background in the training and the years of time building that foundation, that the decisions this person is going to make are going to keep me safe and are going to lead to positive outcomes. So I liked watching leaders that had the tangible job skill of making the correct decision in the moment. And every once in a while, a decision wouldn't work, but they were self-aware enough to recognize it. Oh, that's okay. We're going to pivot and we're going to do this other thing instead. And then that would work. So they not only knew what's probably going to work, they knew what to do if conditions changed and they knew how to adapt. And that isn't the kind of thing you can learn some of that from a textbook, but so much of it is just being out in the world and doing the job. So I loved leaders who not only were decisive, but had track records of success.
Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday about this word decisive and the kind of, I don't know if it is a misconception on reflection now, but I think there is this, we put a lot of weight, a lot of stock in that idea of like the decisive leader, which usually is defined as the person who can make a decision quickly. But I think what actually it is the person who can make the right decision, whether it's quickly or not, will depend on the circumstances. Obviously, in that sort of situation, fast matters too. But I think what we overlook when we define it that way is how those leaders got to the point where they could do that. It's the decades of experience in similar situations of making the wrong decisions, learning what not to do next time, and then gathering all of that expertise together and then being able to reflect on it. And as you said, be self-aware enough to acknowledge, recognize, and learn from, okay, that decision that I got that wrong that time. Next time, I'll do it this way instead. And I think that's the important part of it that we lose in a lot of this narrative about quick decision making and decisiveness and all those other sort of buzzwordy type approaches to it, which doesn't diminish, of course, the value in being able to make decisions.
That's great. Like you said, so much of it is not only making the right decision, but making that pivot, learning from the prior one. It's so key to being a decision maker. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay. 2 more questions. I'm going to be cheeky. I know I said 2 more just now, but it's 2 more again. I promise I won't keep doing that though. If you could go back in time and start your career over again with what you know now, is there anything you would do differently?
Probably not outside of like individual just mistakes or embarrassing moments. But I've always looked back at the mistakes I made on the job or becoming a senior firefighter where I'm now training the young guy, or I became a driver and I'm now training the middle senior guy to operate a fire truck. It was those mistakes that I learned from that made me able to be the officer that I was. So I tend to not reflect too much on the mistakes because to me, they were so valuable.
I think that answer says a lot about you, and it's quite a common answer, which I think speaks to the caliber of guests that I'm fortunate enough to get on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's everything we were saying before, I guess, isn't it? It's that self-reflection piece. And you're right. I mean, it's a paradox, isn't it? Because if you go back and change the mistakes, then you wouldn't have made the mistakes in the first place to have learned that they were mistakes to go back and change them. And yeah, I get a bit confused at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mark, last question. This one's often my favorite one because I get some really cool answers, but it's called Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, but it can be anyone you can think of, they could be alive or dead, past or present, real or even fictitious if you wish, but someone who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. So who is that going to be for you and why?
Yeah, that's such a toughie. Because I started immediately going back to the more famous examples, Abraham Lincoln, and just what did it take to sign an emancipation in the middle of a civil war? Just the courage that had, or Ronald Reagan standing in West Germany and just having the courage to say, tear down this wall. And we're starting a new world right now. This is going to happen. And just that leadership, or you could find any of 10 moments in Winston Churchill's life. I'm going to go with more of a modern one. I can't say like hero, but the amount of respect for what he does. There's former Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink, and him and his military partner, Leif Babin, have written a book called Extreme Ownership. And they do motivational speaking and podcasting and leadership training and leadership seminars and leadership coaching. What I like about what they do is they have brought leadership talk and leadership thought out of the corporate world and brought it to so much more of the common man. When they speak, it's so much common sense of caring, empathy, listening to your team. And they apply it to being in a battlefield as a Navy SEAL. But they're so good at making it applicable to any workplace. And what they've been able to do is make that conversation of military leadership applicable to all workplaces. And what I think they do better than anybody is talk about military leadership being some of the most diverse and fair, to the point of they almost always talk about how their ability to build their teams up is what led to success in the missions, not their command leadership. Follow me, we're going here. They talk almost exclusively about how smart and hardworking the teams were and how they were built up by their teams. And so just their ability to just bring management thought in out of the corporate CEO or the Tony Robbins self-help seminar with the whole arena full of people, they've I think just really deserve their success.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Given what they've done in their lives and their careers, like they have instant respect as soon as they walk in the room, and therefore that makes people listen to them. And I think something else that whenever I speak to a veteran from whatever armed force they've been in, your side of the pond or mine, I always make a point of asking this question about the way the military and military life is often portrayed in, say, film and TV. It's exactly as you said. It's the charging from the front, over the top, over here, I say jump, you say how high, that sort of thing, that autocratic approach, I guess we would call it. Is that the reality? And every single time I've asked that question of someone who has served, the answer has always been no, except in very limited situations. And actually, they then go on to talk about usually like very collaborative leadership processes, a lot of back and forth, a lot of asking the opinions of the people on the ground and doing the actual jobs and listening, and very much the opposite of what most people would expect or understand it's like to work in the military, let alone lead in the military. So I do find that quite an intriguing difference, let's call it.
Yes. My experiences in speaking with veterans is exactly the same as that. The dynamic of the drill instructor and the recruit is exclusive to basic training. Once you're on a team, it is very, very collaborative. And most of the military veterans I've talked to had said it is very rare I've been told exactly what to do. They gave us the expectations. They gave us the training. And when we got put into battle, the boss would say, all right, here's what we need. Here's what I need done. How do you guys want to accomplish it? And they would put it on us. And we would say, I'd like to do A, B, and C. And the boss would say, good, go for that. And then we would just go based on our expectations. And so that's something I talk about in my book is the boss can pick out the strategy, but you could let the crew pick the tactics. I don't need to tell them how to do it. I just tell them what I want done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the underlying narrative there that is also, I think, quite often missed is why they do it that way. It's because it works and it creates the best chance for success. And I think there's a lot of business leaders who would stand to benefit from that lesson.
Yes.
Lovely. And of course, I forgot to say as well, bonus points, because no one's chosen that answer before. So well done.
Oh my goodness. All right then.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. Loved this conversation. One small thing I will ask you now is if anyone in the audience would like to learn more about you or perhaps get a copy of that book, where can they go to do so?
It is for sale on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, and yeah, this is it. That is actually a picture of me on the cover as well. It's cool. Leading Through the Heat. Like I said, it's on Waterstones. So any of those links will work. I have an Instagram page that's got some fire helmet GoPro type cam video on it that I've had a lot of fun doing. So it's Mark DBN Fire, and you'll see a link on there. I'm also on Twitter, and I try to post some leadership thoughts as well.
Awesome. Well, I will pop some of those links down in the show notes as well, so everyone can find them easily.
Great.
That's it. That's all we've got time for. Thank you again so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Wonderful conversation. Thanks for having me.
Huge thanks again to Mark for a lovely conversation today. I learned quite a few things, and it was great having the opportunity to benefit from his highly relevant, highly interesting experience. As I said at the beginning, the link to get his book is down there in the show notes. Do give it a click, see what you think, give it a read. And thank you so much for being with us today, for listening, for watching if you're with us on YouTube or Spotify. There's no podcast without you, the listener, the viewer, so you are very much appreciated. And I hope you found this episode useful, entertaining, engaging, all of the other things as well. If you'd like to support the podcast, there are plenty of links down there in the show notes, options for where you can do that. If you are a new leader, if you're feeling isolated, perhaps the imposter syndrome is tapping you on the shoulder right now, do come and have a conversation with us at Integrity Leaders, the online community for new leaders leading in technical, highly specialist environments. You're welcome to come and join the community straight away, or you can reach out to me if you'd like to have a chat about it first. Either option is fine, no judgment either way, no pressure either way, but the options are there. The website is on the screen and in the show notes. It's leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. And there's plenty of free resources on that website for you as well if you're not quite ready to make a commitment yet. That's all from me today. Just to say, I hope you'll be with us again next week when I'll be talking to Marianne Page about her experiences in leadership and management at McDonald's in the UK. The lessons she learned from all of that about leadership, about management, about sticky systems, about how to make your business a success through consistency, through people. So don't miss that one. Great conversation and some great advice in there for any new leader, new founder, struggling manager. So I hope you'll be back with us next week. And until then, as always, be a leader, not a boss.